Welcome to my first video on YouTube. I'm a few months late to the discussion, but I wanted to give my take on Last Night in Soho. This gorgeous looking movie, it sucked. More specifically, the writing sucked. It's atrocious. Which really sucks, because I really like Edgar Wright. I think he makes great movies, and when I heard that he was making Last Night in Soho, I was really fucking excited to check it out. Until I checked it out. I know this movie is liked by a lot of people, so I want to clarify that this review is not an attack on anyone who enjoyed this movie. I will never tell anyone that
you're watching movies wrong.
That's not the goal of this video. I want to have an honest discussion about what's actually being presented and break down what's broken about the plot. My only issue with Last Night in Soho is the writing. The visual storytelling, which I would define as how the film presents the story visually, is done incredibly well. I expect this is one of the reasons why people like this movie a lot. The cinematography is stunning, the editing is creative and well-paced, the actors delivered fantastic performances, the production design and costume design did a good job bringing the 60s to life, and everything is tied together with the soundtrack that sets the mood very well. As well, Last Night in Soho is a pretty great title for a movie, because right away, it asks, what happened last night in Soho? Creating a sense of mystery. Overall, I was very impressed with the filmmaking techniques presented, but that's to be expected from Edgar Wright. That's where he excels as a director. He does a very good job telling the story he wants to tell, but the story he told was shit. Especially the world building. My god, it's absolutely broken and inconsistent. To quickly summarize the plot, we are introduced to Eloise, or Ellie for short, a girl with a passion for fashion who has an obsession with the 60s and has the ability to see her dead mom.
I see dead people.
She gets an acceptance letter to fashion school and moves to London to become a fashion designer. She encounters obstacles along the way, like encountering creepy men, dealing with her roommate Jocasta, and an overall struggle of adjusting to the big city. So far, the setup is not bad at all. We understand who Ellie is, we know what she wants, and the challenges she has to overcome. Plus, Ellie's supernatural abilities is established, which will definitely come into play at some point, making it harder for her to become a fashion designer.
What do you think of the house that Love built?
To get away from Jocasta, Ellie moves out of student housing and finds a new place at Miss Collins' estate. During Ellie's first night at the new place, this is when all the supernatural stuff starts happening. Ellie finds herself following Sandy, an up-and-coming singer from the 1960s. She meets Jack, who will end up being her manager, and after some drinking, dancing, and some excitement, Ellie wakes up the next morning and continues her day as normal. Okay, see right here? See this frickin' hickey right there? This implies that whatever happens to Sandy also physically happens to Ellie. I want you to keep this in mind. It's very important, and the movie will definitely forget about this. Ellie then proceeds to live two lives. Her life at fashion school during the day, and Sandy's life at night, where she gets an audition and pursues her dream to become a singer. During this time, Ellie is slowly being influenced by Sandy. Ellie changes her hair, her clothes, to become more like Sandy. And because living another person's life gets very expensive, Ellie gets a job at a local pub. This is where she encounters a creepy old man, or I would like to call him the creepy old Red Herring.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
One night, Sandy's life takes a turn for the worst. Instead of getting the chance to sing on stage like she was promised, she's now just a showgirl who is pressured to having sex with men, turning to the life of prostitution, showing that the 1960s isn't all that glamorous. Ellie manages to wake up and escape. Ellie goes on her day, clearly disturbed by the events of what happened, distracting her from her school and work. She's afraid to fall back asleep, but she doesn't need to sleep because she's dragged back into Sandy's life, where she's forced to dance, drink, and pleasure different men. After managing to wake up from this nightmare, We skip to the following night, where Ellie refuses to leave school. John sees Ellie and offers her to go to a Halloween party with them. Not wanting to go home, she agrees to go with John. While at the party, the ghosts from Sandy's past begin to haunt her. Ellie makes the smart decision to go outside and get some fresh air. John checks on her to make sure she's okay, and this is where Ellie offers John to go back to her place for some fun time. Okay, I understand not wanting to sleep, but why not go back to his place if you're so afraid to go back to your room? Anyways, they attempt coitus, but it gets interrupted when Ellie sees Sandy straight up get murdered. Boom. Fucking dead. I absolutely hate this red herring, but I'll go over that later. Ellie freaks out, and it gets interrupted when Miss Collins barges in, and this is when John flees. The following day, Ellie is haunted by even more ghosts from Sandy's past. This prompts her to run away from class, and run throughout London, where ghosts appear around from every corner. This makes us believe that this man right here is Jack. Ellie stumbles upon a police station, where she decides to report Sandy's murder to the police. But they write her off as a crazy person. Though one policewoman does look into Sandy's report, but mentions that she needs more concrete information to help. This prompts Ellie to do more research at the school library. Even with John's help, they don't find anything on Sandy. Ghosts begin to emerge again and scare Ellie away. After John stops Ellie from attempting to stab a ghost, who turned out to be Joe Cast, Ellie flees. She sees Sandy walking throughout London while chanting, "What happened to me?" Ellie pursues her while ghosts keep appearing around from every corner, grabbing her. The trail ends right where she works, at the pub. Ellie then starts work, and she serves the old man who we believe is Jack. Ellie then tries to get a confession out of the old man, but the old man is unnecessarily cryptic in this scene. The old man leaves, but Ellie pursues him, trying to push him for more answers. However, the old man gets hit by a car. Ellie then finds out that the old man is not Jack, but in fact, the cop who tried to help Sandy before. Ellie then decides that London is too much for her and she wants to go back home. And this is when a wild John appears out from fucking nowhere. Ellie gets a letter from John back to Miss Collins' estate, where she hopes to get some of her deposit back and to grab some of her things. Ellie apologizes to Mrs. Collins, but she invites Ellie in for some tea. At first it looks like a sweet old lady trying to calm Ellie down. However, Ellie slowly discovers that Miss Collins is Sandy.
What a twist!
I totally did not see this coming, because how the fuck could you? It makes no sense. Sandy was actually fucking dead. But no. In fact, she actually survived Jack's murder attempt and killed him instead. And all the ghosts that we see were the men that Sandy killed. But then why the fuck didn't Ellie see all of this originally? What the fuck? Apparently the nice policewoman came by and questioned Miss Collins on Sandy's murder. Afraid that the police would get involved, Miss Collins poisoned Ellie's tea to ensure her secret dies with her. As Ellie groans in pain, John knocks on the door. Ellie tries to save John, but gets slapped to the ground. Ellie begins to see double. Man, big fucking rip right here. I think when you start groaning in agonizing pain and start losing cohesion, I think that's the poison kicking in. Ellie should be fucking dead right now. Miss Collins answers the door and lets John in. But oh, Ellie's not dead. Some fucking how. But it's too late. Ellie struggles to crawl upstairs, while Miss Collins slowly follows her. Okay, even if the poison didn't kill her, which it fucking should have, Ellie should still be dead right here. I mean, like, come on, stab her. She's right there. Stab her, stab her. How are you missing? Ellie is in a helpless state right now. How are you missing? While this is all going on, a small cigarette butt was knocked over into the record collection, where a small fire begins. After flexing some of her massive fucking plot armor, Ellie kicks Sandy, causing her to fall down the stairs.
I'm
fallen, and I can't get up.
Ellie then escapes to her room to call for help. But oh no! The dead men appear again and restrain her. They pick up the phone for her and beg for help, asking her to kill Sandy. Then Miss Collins shows up, and all the dead men begin to ree at the sight of Sandy. Jack's ghost even slaps Miss Collins. Wait, what the fuck? Other people can see the ghosts now? Not only that, they can interact with different people now? Hold up. Okay. If the ghosts can interact with Sandy or Miss Collins, then why the fuck did they not haunt her instead? I'll address this point later. After this encounter, we see sirens approaching because the whole building's now on fucking fire. Afraid that she'll go to prison, Miss Collins attempts to kill herself. But Ellie stops her and attempts to convince her to escape. But Miss Collins has made up her mind and tells Ellie to save John and get the hell out. Ellie attempts to save John. Thankfully, the fire department swings by and saves the both of them. Hey, remember how you were poisoned? You should be fucking dead right now. After some time has passed, Ellie presents an updated version of Sandy's dress at the school fashion shoot, getting the love and attention from everyone, even a small wave from Jocasta, then a passive-aggressive stare. Which is weird because Ellie almost fucking killed you. Man, Jocasta should have just straight up ignored her at the very least, or should have given her the finger in a justifiable rage. Also, didn't she call security? Why didn't Jocasta get the police involved and press charges? How did that whole issue get resolved? What the fuck? Ellie should be in some goddamn trouble right now. Fun fact, there was actually a clip in the deleted scenes where security attempts to chase Ellie down. But this part still doesn't get resolved, even with the deleted scenes. I figured this part was cut out from the movie in hopes that everyone would just somehow forget how Ellie almost fucking murdered somebody, but it's okay. I didn't forget. But anyways, after John and her grandmother congratulate Ellie, the film ends when Ellie sees her mom and Sandy in a mirror. Okay, a lot to unpack here. Now that we got the summary out of the way, let's talk about how broken the world building and story is. So I get Ellie going back in time to live the 60s is the selling point of the entire movie, but this whole thing makes no fucking sense. So how does Ellie's supernatural abilities work? How does the ability to see dead people allow you to relive the life of another person who is still alive, by the way? I think the writers wanted to deliver an epic twist at the end, but didn't understand the implications that twist would have on their story. The fact that Sandy is alive destroys the world building. It makes sense that Ellie can see all the men who died, but there's no connection between interacting with dead people and reliving the life of a living person. There needs to be a connection because what's preventing Ellie from living the life of literally anyone else in London? If Sandy was actually murdered, like we were led to believe, then there would have been a loose connection. We could have at least assumed that Ellie's abilities would have allowed Sandy's ghost to show her what happened and maybe show that Sandy has some unfinished business, which clearly worked because Ellie was trying to find Jack, who was the alleged killer. How funny would it have been if Ellie lived the life of one of the murdered men or Jack? Just imagine if Ellie starts to look and act more like Jack. That would have made a little more sense than Ellie living Sandy's life. Though this would have changed the movie a lot. But let's pretend for a second that Ellie's ability to see Sandy's past makes sense. My next question is, in what capacity does Ellie watch Sandy's life? Is Ellie trapped in Sandy's point of view? Or is she just an observer? Clearly it must be from Sandy's point of view, right? Ellie appears to be bound to Sandy's movements. She even gets a hickey from the first night. If she was just an observer, then she would not have gotten that hickey in the first place. But having the ability to switch from point of view to an observer role would imply that Ellie has some level of control in that twisted nightmare world. But but the film wants us to believe that she has no control in that world at all. Also, I want to bring up that hickey again. If Ellie is physically affected by Sandy's actions, then why didn't Ellie end up having her throat slit when Jack murdered Sandy? She got that hickey from him earlier, but ignored the knife to the throat? Or if we go with that retcon ending, then why doesn't Ellie have a scar on her hands like the one that Miss Collins has? I guess this part was ignored because if Ellie did get those marks, then the big twist would have been ruined. The strongest defense I've encountered for the movie's world building is the stone tape theory. It's a term that some people have been using to justify what's been going on. After doing some research, there's an interview from The Guardian where Edgar Wright said he uses the Stonewall theory for his ghosts rather than the traditional ghost hunting story. Some of you might be confused as to what the Stonewall theory is. This is my understanding of it. Is when mental impressions from an emotional or traumatic event are projected into a form of energy, which is then recorded onto an inanimate objects, such as stones, rooms, anything really. And in the movie's situation, the trauma from Sandy's past have been recorded into Ellie's room, and Ellie is sensitive enough to experience these recordings whenever she's in her room. Okay, this is kind of a massive fucking problem. First of all, if this was true, then how can Ellie experience Sandy's traumatic emotions whenever she's outside of her room? According to this theory, she shouldn't be able to do so, but she does. Can these energy recordings be picked up from anywhere in London? If it does, Ellie would literally have an aneurysm the moment she steps foot in the city. It's a major city with an extensive history where a massive population has lived and died over countless generations. Since Ellie is not able to control her abilities, what's preventing her from feeling the traumatic energy of literally anyone else in London? She could potentially relive and experience millions of people's lives. Really fortunate that Ellie grew up in a small ass town where nothing's going on. It's also a miracle that Ellie doesn't simply see recordings of every dead person wherever she walks in London. So I think we have to dive into death of the author in this situation, i.e. a writer who misinterpreted their own creation. The next topic I want to address next are the two incredibly lazy red herrings in the room, Sandy's death and the old man. Misdirection itself is not a bad thing to have. In fact, it's a really useful tool to have, especially in a murder mystery. With that being said, the two red herrings are incredibly lazy misdirections. One of them straight up retcons the story to make the final twist work. We saw Ellie witness Sandy's murder, and Sandy's ghost even chants, "What happened to me?" The film would have worked better if she was actually dead, because now we have to deal with a really awkward question. Can any of the visions Ellie had witnessed be a lie? That has to be the case for this to work. And if that is the case, were there any other instances where what she saw didn't really happen in the 1960s? It's super convenient that it was just the one vision that lied to her. For all we know, everything Ellie had witnessed could have just been made up. I'm pretty sure this was an unintentional consequence that the writers did not even think about when they wrote the big twist at the end. The worst part about this red herring is that it's easily fixable. If they cut the flashback before we see Jack stab Sandy and only imply the murder, then this would have just been a simple misdirection, and not another problem in the world building. The second red herring I want to address is this old guy right here. So let's break him down. When we first see him, he comes across as a creep, and we're led to believe that he is Jack, Sandy's alleged killer. But the big twist is that he was actually the cop who talked to Sandy way back in the 1960s. In all honesty, a character like this should have not been as prominent in the movie as he should have been. If he acted like a real person or a real detective that was competent, he just would have not said anything. There is very little reason for him to be interacting with Ellie at all. Because if he was a detective that knew about the events of Sandy's life, then he just would have kept that to himself. And if he didn't find Miss Collins, then he would have just left Soho. But the movie needed him to interact with Ellie, because if he didn't, then we couldn't have this red herring. One last thing that I want to cover are the ghosts themselves. The dead can interact with Ellie. Surprisingly enough, this part makes the most sense out of this whole madness, since we actually had a setup and payoff for this. It was established that Ellie can see the dead. We could infer that the ghosts have unfinished business, and then Ellie would be the only one who could interact with them. Where this begins to fall apart is why can Ellie see these ghosts and not other ghosts in London? As mentioned before, there probably would be millions of lingering dead people who would have unfinished business in London. Also, on a side note, if these dead men can physically interact with Ellie, then why doesn't her mom interact with Ellie? So what do the dead men want with Ellie? Well, they do the classic horror film trope and scare her for no reason, but I think it's simpler to work backwards on this one. Ultimately, they want help. More specifically, they want Ellie to kill Sandy for closure. If that's what you guys want, then why are you wasting time by scaring her and not communicate that sooner to her? You're clearly ghosts that can't move on because you have unfinished business. But I guess if they did tell Ellie what they wanted early on, then that would have been an entirely different story from what the writers would have wanted. Hold up. If their goal is to kill Sandy, and they are able to physically interact with Miss Collins, then why not haunt and kill Miss Collins without Ellie? If someone was going to argue, oh, Jack's ghost was only able to slap Miss Collins physically because Ellie is a conduit for them to exist, then the ghost should just restrain Ellie and physically force her to kill Sandy, or even try tricking Ellie to commit murder, which almost worked on Jocasta actually. But if Miss Collins was able to see the ghosts thanks to Ellie being a conduit, then why don't other people see the ghosts as well in other points of the movie? If Ellie was meant to be the only person who can see these ghosts, then Miss Collins should not be able to see them at all. You can't have your cake and eat it too. This is a massive contradiction. Even if the themes are really interesting, which they are, trust me, I understood what they were trying to convey. They were conveying for themes of nostalgia, glamour and trauma, totally embodying the, oh, I was born in the wrong era, but then realizing that every era has their own ups and downs. Also how someone from a small town can have difficulties adjusting to the big city, even implying that there might be some mental health issues with Ellie. Fantastic stuff to incorporate into a movie. But it's all meaningless if the world building is broken, contradictory, and anything can just fucking happen in the story. Where are the stakes? The mystery, the purpose of anything happening if a writer can just retcon the events of their own story to guarantee an outcome. Though some people will definitely argue that as long as the movie has good themes, then what does it matter if the writing and world building aren't perfect? Man, that is a big insult to the efforts made by other writers who are able to present compelling themes and maintain a well-constructed story. Now that I've got that off my shoulders, I feel relieved. Even if no one ends up seeing this review, then I at least made my peace. One main reason why I wanted to talk about Last Night in Soho is, if you can believe it, even after I criticized the writing, I have a lot of respect for Edgar Wright. He really is a talented filmmaker, leagues better than a whole lot of working directors out there right now. I know he's capable of doing better. He has done better. He's made a lot of fantastic movies that don't have the blatant writing issues presented in Last Night in Soho. It feels weird criticizing him. I hope he will do better in the next movie. The last thing I want for him is to get complacent and lose touch on his writing, because everyone is telling him he did a good job. He certainly hasn't lost his touch as a director. Krysty Wilson-Cairns was a writer on Last Night on Soho as well. She's also really talented. She wrote 1917, and even though the premise of 1917 is fundamentally simple, the story is really well executed. I hope she doesn't get complacent in her writing as well. If you made it this far, then thank you for watching. Starting a film review channel was something I've always wanted to do. I just didn't have the time and energy until now. But anyways, I'm open to suggestions on what to cover next, as well as any constructive criticisms in the comments below. Until next time, later days.